I'm joined now by Mal Fletcher, a futurist, social commentator, and chairman of 2030 Plus. And Mal, we're talking today about what's been hailed as a groundbreaking bilateral agreement between the UK and the USA, and because they've agreed, in principle, to develop together ways of testing whether AI tools and the systems backing them up are actually safe. And our Secretary of State, Michelle Donnellan, has told reporters that the safe development of AI is a shared global issue. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's good to be with you, Dave. I think the concept of this US-UK agreement is a step in the right direction. It's all about AI safety. That's welcome. It's overdue, in fact. But I think it still falls well short of what we urgently need in this space. This is, after all, what we call a memorandum of understanding. It carries with it no legislative action. There are no binding regulations addressing AI research and development. And this is what we at 2030 Plus Futures Forum and others have been calling for a long time. Debates and agreements on ethical guidelines that should be applied to how AI is developed, followed by firm government regulations to codify those ethics in terms that big tech has to adhere to for the common good. That's particularly important at the moment for reasons we might come to in a minute. This is a step in the right direction, as I say, but AI is growing more powerful all the time through machine learning and so on. And like all techs in history that have been capable of great good, AI is also capable of doing great damage. The European Parliament recognised that. It's the first major governing body in the world to draft laws to limit the social damage AI might do. The US and Britain need to head in the same direction, and very, very quickly.
You mentioned the damage AI might do, and of course there are potential ways it could do great beneficial actions for society as well. Does this all really boil down to who has control of the major AI tools as they're developed?
Yes, absolutely, it does. And as far as we can see, the agreement we're talking about here makes no demands for things like transparency on the part of these AI developers, on issues like how AI is trained, what sources and types of data are fed into it, and the cleaning up of AI's built-in biases, which it inherits from its programmers. Studies have shown around the world that some AI models are inherently biased, for example, against people of different coloured skin. They find it hard to differentiate faces of individuals who have darker skin, for example. So AI also has been shown to carry some gender bias, especially when it comes to employment opportunities. You know, how can we ever solve the problem of gender disparities in the workplace if we're allowing these biases to slip through? And because we are relying more and more on generative AI, it's vital that we identify and remove those biases as soon as we possibly can. And that can't be left to these multinational corporations that produce the AI models, because they answer primarily to their shareholders, not to us, the citizenry. And it's going to do great damage to law enforcement, identity security, and, as I said, access to jobs if we don't do something on that.
Well, you mentioned there, just in passing, the ways it's already beginning to pervade society. Most of us probably are only aware of it in the sort of generative chat idea where you type in a sentence and AI rewords it for you into a paragraph or even in some cases a book. What sort of ways is it already being used around the world?
Well, it's being used in healthcare. We're seeing more and more developments in AI-assisted surgeries, AI-assisted remote surgeries with a doctor in one place and a patient in another. It's being developed for education now to help students have a more immersive education experience. So instead of, for example, learning a language in a piecemeal way, as we've always done up to now, you might be able to learn a language in a completely immersive environment for several hours a day. Now, that would be very exciting. Learning history, for example, by seeing events take place in almost real time in front of your eyes, being actually there in 3D because of AI's ability to crunch data. But one of the areas that also interests me is its impact on social media, because so many people now use it as a primary source of news and education. So if AI performs badly in those areas, it could have disastrous results. I can imagine a time not too far from now when people will hand over almost their entire architecture in social media to machines. That's not as far-fetched as we might think. We don't do navigation anymore. We don't do mental arithmetic or spelling or grammar because we've delegated those mental tasks to digital gadgets that frees up our time. Many people already use AI to create entire media streams in their social media space based on their basic interests and opinions. So it's just logical that they want to cut out the middleman and allow the AI to craft it and post it automatically. That could have some terrible results because who's accountable for an errant AI? If an AI says something that incites hatred or violence, who do we hold to account for that? So there are so many questions that we need to address, and we need to go much further than this agreement, though it's a step in the right direction.
And of course, at the minute, Mal, we're talking primarily about issues where AI gets it wrong, makes mistakes, is fed the wrong data. What about if AI is used by people who want to harm society, who want to commit crime even?
Yeah, well, I think you and I talked recently, didn't we, about the National Cybersecurity Centre's warning on everyday people getting involved in crime. And there's things on our website about that, 2030plus.com. I know you have material too. But I think this is another issue that these agreements that we're coming up with between governments are not yet addressing. International standards for testing AI, because any AI model can now have a global impact. So we need a consistency in the way that AI is tested around the world. Otherwise, a technology group might release a weak AI model in a market with fewer regulations, knowing that it will spread from there to an international market where maybe the rules are stronger, stricter. So there's so much more we need to do across the oceans. So an agreement's a good thing, but we need to go much further.
Does this also potentially, Mal, speak to us of the importance of actual human interactions and relationships? Because as we find we can potentially trust less and less what we see and hear on a screen, partly because of AI and people using it for fraudulent activities, is it ever more important that we do actually get to know the people who are important in our lives, including things like local politicians, including people who really are having an impact in our area and in our country?
Yeah, it's absolutely vital, Dave. And I've been talking about this quite a long time in the media. We tend to trust technology because we use it so much. So we assume that the technology is inherently good and has our best interests at heart because we use it and we trust it so much. That's a little bit naive because we know that big tech companies make their money from marketing, which is pitched to us based upon our data. So our data is being used, and we also don't often know who else is getting access to that data, who the big tech companies might be giving it to, selling it to, and so on. We know that's happened in the past. As I said before, big tech companies are only answerable to their shareholders. Their concern is the bottom line, and data is their bread and butter. So when we talk about testing a moment ago, we need to apply those tests to powerful big tech companies as well as smaller outfits. And the testing has to be retrospective so that these big tech groups can't rush through new and potentially unstable AI models in the hope of avoiding coming legislation. So there's lots of work we need to do. But yes, basically you and I need to trust the technology just a little bit less. I'm not talking about paranoia. I'm talking about being wise. And by the way, we really do need to see these ethical discussions drawing in more than just politicians and big tech people. We need to see, philosophers, we need to see engineers, we need to see physicists, we need to see theologians coming into these discussions. Because after all, this is not just a question of AI's capabilities. It's actually a question of what does it mean to be human? If we're trying to reproduce the ability and supersede the ability of humans in the mental and thinking areas, we should be asking, well, what does it mean to be human?
Mal Fletcher from 2030 Plus. Thank you for joining us today.